Thank you very much, Hill, for this opportunity again to join you. Let me just begin by saying a few things. First is, if you show your face, it's easier for me to speak to people than to black boxes. So as I always say, I'm quite sympathetic if you haven't curled your eyelashes and, painted your nails green with silver glitter. But nevertheless, I find it easier to speak to people. I get a sense of whether people are following me or not following me. So unless you have some special reason, like you just put some cucumber paste on your face or one of those other things that people do, then it's easier to speak to you as a human rather than as a diagram or an avatar. Secondly, thank you to Rabbi Hill. First of all, let me just say that Tzfat is an amazing place, absolutely unique, and Shabbos there, I have the most amazing memories. I remember in the Kosovo shul, they're dancing, they have a unique tune that they sing on Shabbos, dancing around where you can see the view to Meron and over the mountains. Absolutely unique. I don't know if you know about this, but Tzfat is unique in all the cities of Israel and probably all the cities in the world. Anyone know what the most outstanding feature of Tzfat is? What uniquely separates from all other cities? Incredibly and amazingly, it's the only city that doesn't have a church. And in every other city, as you know, there's a church on one corner and a pub on the other corner, certainly in England, probably on every corner. Tzfat is unique. Probably one of the reasons that it attracted the great Kabbalists of the 1500s was a concentration of the most amazing personalities of Jewish history of that era, really. And you feel it when you're there. So it's a really, really, I would say, a life-changing opportunity. And what could be better than being with Rabbi Hill, a friend who goes back a long way, somebody who has, I would say, a poetic and musical soul, if I may put it that way. And when you spend Shabbos with him, I think you'll understand what I mean. Let me also ask you to mute yourself if you don't mind. I'm getting some feedback, so it will help me if you're on mute, and then you're welcome to make a comment in the chat box, or perhaps if there's time for questions, that's just fine. But if you don't mind just keeping yourself muted so I can talk freely. Okay, let's talk about this amazing subject of Shabbos and Yom Tov. Shabbat. I will try to show the difference between Shabbat and Chagim and use this as an avenue of access to nothing less than the purpose of life itself. If Rabbi Hill doesn't mind, I'll do a little shameless self-promotion, because I've just written a book about Shabbat. It's called Shabbat and the Festivals, Journey and Destination. And it's about to be published, not quite out yet, just finalizing the graphics of the cover. But I would hope that within a couple of weeks, it will be printed, and maybe within a month or so, it will be available. And if you order, you can pre-order your first copy with Rabbi Hill, and I'm sure we can arrange a significant discount for you. And I hope you'll enjoy it. And what I'd like to give you tonight is a little bit of a preview of some of the themes that are covered in that book, mostly what I learned from Rav Moshe Shapiro. And you'll see the book is in two parts. One is an approach to an understanding of what Shabbat is, and the second part, some deeper ideas, perhaps for people a bit more advanced. And for those whose Hebrew is good enough, I'm going to make Rav Moshe Shapiro's shiurim available on my website. So those who would like to learn through the material in the book, you can actually go back and listen to his original classes. But for those whose Hebrew is not good enough, you will find the material in my book. But let me ask a few questions about Shabbat. And to bring it out as sharply as I can, I would like to try to discuss the difference between Shabbat and festivals, show you that these are two completely different wavelengths or mindsets, ask why that is true, and then try to give an insight into what Shabbat is that I hope you will find changes your life forever. Here are a few questions. You know, we have a way of calling people who are loyal to their Judaism Shomrei Shabbat. That's an ancient, long-standing practice in the Jewish community. Somebody who's authentically observant of Jewish law, a Shomer Shabbat. Somebody who observes Shabbat. Why have we chosen to define a Jew by Shabbat? There are hundreds and hundreds of other commandments. Some of them might seem more fundamental. Why is somebody who happens to observe Shabbat, as opposed to Kashrut or many other aspects of Judaism, we call such a person a Shomer Shabbat? Why does Shabbat define the Jew? Second question. Why do we need Shabbat every week? When we encounter other messages that are fundamental to Judaism, once a year is good enough. What's more important than being carved out as the unique people to fulfill a unique historical role, the Jewish people. Once a year, we have an incredibly potent educational experience. We sit down with the family, educate the children. We make an indelible impression on their minds. That's called the Pesach Seder. Once a year, good enough. What's more important than receiving the Torah itself? Once a year, we celebrate that. You see, there's something so fundamentally different about Shabbos that we cannot go more than 6 days without experiencing it. And therefore, this suggests strongly that there's something much more basic about Shabbat than there is about other time cycle events in Judaism. Next question. We observe Shabbat by not doing. Very, very interesting, very strange. The law of Shabbat is you may not fulfill or perform 39 particular creative activities. Very bizarre. Why is this holy day, holiest of all days, constructed by simply not doing? Perhaps I can put the question this way. We know that Shabbat is a temple in time, right? There are many indications that Shabbat is actually a temple in time. Just to give you one clue, when we talk about the introduction of Shabbat, as you will enjoy in Tzfat, in an unforgettable way, we say Lecha Dodi. Lecha Dodi is all about Yerushalayim and the building of the temple. What does that have to do with Shabbat? Plenty. But for now, let us just say that the temple in Yerushalayim is a temple in space, and Shabbat is a temple in time. Incidentally, this is why you dress specially on Shabbat. You don't run on Shabbat. You speak in a different way. You behave like you behave in a sanctified space. Now, the question is this. You don't build temples by inactivity. To build a temple, you build, you do. Shabbat we construct by not building, by not doing, by simply desisting from activity. How on earth is avoiding actions, avoiding constructive and creative actions, how does that build a holiness which is uniquely Shabbat? Technically speaking, if you do nothing on Shabbat, you sleep all day, you observe Shabbat. Obviously, that's not a constructive, positive observation of Shabbos, but you will have fulfilled the law of Shabbat, and that needs explanation. Another question. The punishment for breaking Shabbat is extremely serious. It's a life and death matter. Breaking a Chag is not like that. If you desecrate a festival, it's a terrible thing, but there's no death penalty, so to speak, attached to it. Why is the penalty for breaking Shabbat a life and death question? You sign your name, you plant a seed, you build something small. Why is life and death dependent on observance of Shabbat? Another question, a more sophisticated question. The word Shabbat is based on a root, a two-letter root. You know, there are basic three-letter roots in Hebrew, but there are also more compressed two-letter roots. The two-letter root of the word Shabbat is shav, which means to sit. It has other meanings as well. It also alludes to tshuva. That's another theme in Shabbos. But one of the themes of the concept of Shabbat is to sit. In fact, in case you think I'm stretching a point, the Torah actually says, Shvu ish tachtav, that every person must sit in his place. The point about Shabbat is to sit down. Now, the problem with that is that in Jewish thinking, in Torah, sitting is always sad and tragic. Sitting is always sad and tragic. Let me ask again those who've just... Okay, you should be able to hear me now. So the question is, why is Shabbat associated with sitting? Sitting is sad. First of all, let me give you the source for that. The Gemara says that every time the Torah says, and he sat, or and they sat, tragedy strikes. Vayeshev Yaakov, Vayeshev Yisrael. Every time the Torah begins a story by introducing the thought of sitting, tragedy and bad events supervene. And the Maharal explains why. Maharal says this world is for walking and for progression. This world is not for sitting passive. You know what Jewish law is called? Halacha. Very interesting word for a set of laws. Walking. Jewish law is called a progression. That's what halacha means. So the question that we need to ask is, why is Shabbat associated with the position of sadness? You know, I'm sure you all know that when someone dies, lo aleinu, We fulfill the mitzvah of mourning in a sitting position. We even call it sitting Shiva. We sit for 7 days. And the reason is we're acting in empathy with the soul that can no longer walk. Since the soul can no longer walk or move, we sit in empathy in that same position of stasis and stagnation. And therefore, there's no question that sitting is always a manifestation of sadness. Why on earth is Shabbat fulfilled by a sitting? And the very name implies the function of sitting. This needs an explanation. Somebody who's sensitive to language will also realize that a place of Torah study is called a yeshiva, and that means a place where you sit. And that's equally problematic. First of all, why would we name a place of Torah study, which is the ultimate joy, a place of sitting, which is a sadness? And secondly, sitting is irrelevant to Torah study. You know, you can stand on your head if you want when you learn Torah. Sitting is irrelevant. The Gemara goes so far as to say that in the old days, they used to stand when they learned Torah out of respect. Today we sit because we're weak. But sitting is not of essence. Why would the Jewish people name an institution of Torah study for something irrelevant and sad? Incidentally, again, someone with a sensitive understanding will realize that there's a deep hint here that Shabbat and Torah are very clearly linked. First of all, you see that they both relate to the word sitting. Secondly, you see that there are only 2 mitzvahs in the Torah that non-Jews may not fulfill. You know that? Non-Jews are allowed to fulfill the mitzvahs of the Torah if they wish. If a non-Jew wants to sit in a sukkah or take a lulav, absolutely no problem. There are 2 mitzvahs that non-Jews may not fulfill, and they're very serious prohibition. One is observe Shabbat, and second is learn Torah. Very interesting. I'll give you a third connection. The Gemara says that somebody who is learned in Torah is called Shabbat. Isn't that interesting? What do you call a person who studied Torah much? You call him Mr. Shabbat. Very interesting. You see that Torah study is identified with Shabbos. That also needs explanation. Now, these things are not true of a festival. Let me just add one question about festivals to show sharply their difference. And the question is this. The mitzvah of Shabbos is to rest. In fact, sitting is a resting position. The mitzvah of a festival is joy. Not sitting at all. There's no mitzvah to rest on a festival. There's no mitzvah. There's no concept of menucha, which means resting on a festival. There is a mitzvah of simcha. On Shabbat, there's a mitzvah of resting, and there's no mitzvah of simcha. There's no obligation to be happy formally on Shabbat. It is true we mention happiness in various ways on Shabbos, and we have an expression called oneg, which means delicious pleasure on Shabbos, but not simcha. On a Yom Tov Samachta b'chagecha, you have a mitzvah to rejoice on your festival. Why does the Torah want us to rejoice in festivals and rest on Shabbos? Completely different mindsets and headspaces. Okay, these are some of the questions. Now I'd like to suggest to you an answer that I hope you will find illuminating. Are we clear on the questions? Could you just raise your hand? Give me some indication if the questions are clear to you. Okay, I must admit I can see very few faces, but I'm trusting that those who are being represented by black boxes are also human. Rabbi Hill, I see your students are such humble and reticent people. They want to remain completely anonymous. Okay. Let me suggest to you an answer. Shabbat, my friends, is much more than a weekend. People think Shabbat, it's a weekend. It's been healthy psychologically, kept the Jewish people intact, because Shabbat is much, much more than that. Let me hasten to add that a break from routine is worthwhile. Make no mistake. I would say to somebody who's not very spiritual and contemplating engaging Judaism, I would say you should keep Shabbat even if you're not religious or spiritual at all. Just the psychological, emotional benefit of having a day when you can simply commune with yourself, your marriage partner, your family on a deep level without the tyranny of gadgets and social media. And most of us are so addicted to our gadgets. We just can't survive. We can only communicate via those gadgets. I walked past a restaurant some time ago and I saw a very romantic scene. It's a young man and a woman sitting at a table. There was a candle lit and a rose in a vase on the table. And then I saw both of them were texting. on their phones. Maybe they were testing each other, maybe that's the only way they could communicate. But no, that's not the way to be. And on Shabbos, when you live in a world where you don't have the intrusion of the media and you can actually relate, gentlemen, you can look into your wife's eyes over the candles and remind yourself of her name, before you fall asleep with your nose in the soup. That's a very, very good opportunity. And it's worth keeping Shabbos, if only for that. But I want to suggest to you that Shabbat is much, much more than simply a healthy weekend break. And here's the secret. Every journey is given meaning by its destination. Every process is given meaning by its endpoint. Any process, any sequence in the world, classically, let's take a journey, is meaningful only because it goes someplace. A journey that goes no someplace is ridiculous. A person walking around in circles going nowhere, telling you they're on a journey, is just ridiculous. A journey is defined by its destination. A complex process involving many steps is justified by its endpoint. A complex process that has no endpoint is ridiculous. Imagine you visit a famous inventor and you walk into this lab, and on the workbench you see an incredibly complicated looking machine. You say to the inventor, "This looks interesting, what does it do?" He says, "This is a breakthrough in the history of human technology. I've invented a machine that when you switch this machine on, it fuels itself, it cleans itself, it oils itself. If it breaks, it fixes itself." And that's what it does. You say, "That's unbelievable. What does this machine actually do?" He says, No, you don't understand. This machine fixes itself, fuels itself, cleans itself." You say, "I know, but what does it do? What does it produce?" He says, "No, you're missing this point. This machine, the man's an idiot. I mean, he's a brilliant idiot, but he's an idiot. If a machine does all that stuff and makes you a pizza, it's a clever machine. If it does all that stuff and makes you a cup of coffee, it's a clever machine. But a machine that does nothing other than keep the machine going, that is insane." And I hate to tell you this, but most people live that way. Most people keep going to work to keep surviving, to keep going to work to keep surviving. For what? Oh, for a few days at the end of the year where they collapse unconscious on a beach someplace so they can do it again. Isn't that a travesty of human existence? If you ask those people, "Why are you doing this?" they'll tell you, "Because eventually I'll have enough that I'll really be able," believe me, by then your arthritis will be so bad, you won't be able to chase what you thought you'd be chasing. That is a travesty of human existence. To keep surviving, in order to keep surviving, is absolutely ridiculous. There's got to be a destination. If you are moving through your life and not going anyplace, what a disastrously depressing travesty of what life's all about. There's got to be a reason. There has to be a destination. What's the Jewish answer to this problem? The Jewish answer is that life is a journey, indeed, to a destination. The destination is what we call the world to come. The world to come is a destination that gives meaning to all of life. A life that goes no place, that passes in transient fashion, that every moment you try to grasp passes away and moves away, right? That eventually ends up no place. What a disaster! What a depressing experience. Our view of life is that it's a journey towards a destination which is ecstatic. The destination gives meaning to every moment of life. The Jewish view of life, my friends, is that it's a journey to a destination that is nothing other than the journey has built. What is our conception of the world to come? It is a dimension where you go, where all you experience is what you have become. The Zohar puts it in very, very poetic and compressed terms. The Zohar says that in the next world, tama etz ketama pri. In the world to come, the taste of the tree is the taste of the fruit. What does that mean? In this world, a tree is a long process, takes years to grow, and eventually you get a delicious fruit. In the world to come, you'll be able to walk up to a tree and eat the fruit or the tree. Then you'll realize the tree is the fruit. This life is its reward. In the next world, all you will have is a replay of your life from the perspective of reward. My friends, when you take a journey, the destination is nothing other than every step of the journey has yielded. If you're one step short of destination, you haven't arrived. Every step in life, everything that you do, every difficulty you conquer, every difficulty you overcome, every life challenge that you deal with successfully is constructing an eternity. Of course, you need a little faith for this. If you have zero faith and you think that when you die, you just disappear, you might as well just jump off the nearest building. I mean, because every moment of pleasure in life, in fact, the greatest in pleasures in life, they are so fast, so transient that you can't hold on to them for a moment. And the older you get, unfortunately, the faster it happens. And therefore, the whole point of life is that you cannot hold on to a moment of reality. All you can ever do with the moment of reality is export it into a world of eternity. Now, the Chavetz Chaim gave a very beautiful illustration of this. He said, imagine a man who's shipwrecked, tossed by the waves, about to drown, and finally, unbelievably, crawls up naked and dripping on a beach someplace, gasping for air. As he lies there, he suddenly sees a group of people walking down the beach, and they walk up to him, they put royal robes on him, they start bowing down to him. Whatever he says, they do. They put him on a throne in a palace, and he rules the island. After a few months, he thinks to himself, this has to mean something. He takes one of his trusted advisors into a secret room, a private room, and he says to him, tell me, what does this mean? The man says, Your Majesty, it's good that you asked. This happens here every year. Every year, someone's washed up on our beach and we make him king. He says, what happens at the end of the year? He says, we march into his room with long faces. We take him down to the beach. We put him in a little ship, little boat. We push him off. We wait for the next one. He says, what do you suggest I do? The man says, if I were you, I'd start exporting. Send everything of value that you can to the mainland. And when that sad day comes and we push you off in that little boat, your heart will be singing. You'll start rowing off to the place we have. And that's what he does. He starts exporting everything that he can. And sure enough, at the end of the year, they walk into his room very, very sad. They march him down to the beach. They strip him down. They put him in a little boat and they push him off. And his heart is singing. Chavetz Chaim says, that's you. You washed up on the shores of this place, a naked little gasping child. And they start oohing and awing over you and doing whatever you want and dressing you and whatever you want you have. Only an intelligent person will take the trusted advisor of his intellect and he'll say, what does this mean? And you'll soon realize this doesn't go on forever. There are not too many people walking around here who've been here for 150 years. One day, sooner or later, with long faces, they're going to march you down and put you in a little wooden, and send you off. What's the strategy? Start exporting. Spend your life exporting things that can live in another dimension. And when that sad day comes and they put you in that little wooden box, your heart will be singing because you'll be going to a dimension where you exported things that have eternal existence. And that is what life is. Life is a movement, one moment of which cannot be retained, to a destination that gives meaning to all those transient moments. And in that dimension of result, there's nothing you can do. When you leave this world and you enter the ecstasy of another world, the greatness of that world is its ecstasy. The sadness of that world is no more opportunity, cannot no longer construct. All you have in that world is what you have constructed. Let's go back to what Shabbat is. Shabbat is called Me'en Olam Haba. It's a premonition of another world. Every week you enter a zone where all you have is what you've done. The reason you keep Shabbat by not doing anything is because you're practicing what it will feel like to live in another world where you can no longer do anything. All you have on Shabbat is what you prepared beforehand. All you will have in the world to come is what you prepared beforehand. The reason that you observe Shabbat every week is because there's no message as fundamental as that. Every other message in Judaism once a year is good enough. But there's one message you can never forget while you're on a journey, the destination. Every other aspect of a journey is negotiable. The fast route, the slow route, the scenic route, the cheap route, the expensive route, first class, second class, all that's negotiable. There's one thing that's not negotiable about a journey. That's a destination. If you run a company and the aim of the company is to make money, every single thing you do needs to make money. Even when you're spending money, it needs to be because you're making money. And therefore, in life, there's one thing you can never afford to forget, and that's where you're going, the destination. Everything you do in this world is being invested in eternity. And therefore, we need it every week. And therefore, we keep Shabbos by not doing, because we're living in a zone that is a presaging event of a world in which you can no longer do. The ecstasy of Shabbos, the oneg of Shabbos, is enjoying richly what you prepared beforehand, because that's all you have on Shabbos. You cannot prepare anything new. That is exactly the mode of being. Why is Shabbos sitting? There's only one place where you can sit in joy, and that's when you've arrived. Sitting is terribly sad when you should be moving. Sitting is tragic when you're sitting when you should be moving. But when you reach destination, of course you sit. Of course you stop moving. You've arrived. Any movement there would be away from essence. And therefore, the whole concept of Shabbos is to come to an endpoint and a destination. Let's speak just briefly about the connection between Shabbos and Torah. You know what the concept of Torah is? Endpoint and destination. The only thing you will ever do in the world that you do for its own sake is learning Torah Lishma. Learning Lishma means learning for the pleasure of learning. Listen carefully to this. There are only two things in life that you will ever do for their own sake. Everything else is always done for something else. Why do you study? For the exam. Why do you want the exam? For the degree. Why do you want the degree? For the job. Why do you want the job? It goes on and on. Give me one example of a thing that you do in life only for its own sake. There are only two. Shabbat and learning Torah Lishma. Learning Torah Lishma means you're learning Torah for the pleasure of learning to think how God thinks. Nothing else. I'm not talking about learning Torah in order to know what to do. That's another level. I'm talking about Lishma. Lishma means you're enjoying learning Torah for the pleasure of learning Torah. No other motivation, and there's nothing as delicious as that. And Shabbos, you are doing because it's endpoint, destination. It doesn't go on Shabbat. You're not even allowed to think of what you're going to do after Shabbos. No preparation. The headspace of Shabbos is everything is here. Ke'ilu kol melachtecha asuya, as if all your work has been done. You're not even preparing for anything after Shabbos because this is where all roads lead. Shabbos is the delicious experience of living as you are, not as you are in transit, in movement, in journeying someplace else, dissatisfied because you haven't arrived. Shabbos is having arrived. Shabbat, you simply relish what you are. The beauty of Shabbos is a meditation in who you are. Marriage on Shabbos is an ecstatic experience because it's celebrating the relationship for what it is, being with your family on Shabbos. The concept of Shabbos is not a weekend. It's a deep meditation in who I am in essence, not where I'm heading, not where I've come from. Shabbos is simply enjoying in the moment. It is totally in the moment. And therefore, no thought about after Shabbos, no preparation, no construction, simply relishing and enjoying what you have become. Of course, if you haven't become anything, if you spent the week wasting time, Shabbos is utterly depressing. Utterly depressing. The Christians moved it to a Sunday and the Muslims moved it to a Friday. They couldn't handle it. Right? Shabbos is meaningful when you've built, when you've constructed, when you've spent a week becoming a different person. Then what you relish on Shabbos is what you have become. And therefore, that is what Torah is. And this, my friends, is why non-Jews may not keep Shabbos and may not learn Torah. You know why? The concept is this. Jacob and Esau, Yaakov and Esau, divide the roles of the world between them. Yaakov's work is connecting the world to the spiritual world. Esau's work is perfecting the world. Do a little survey. Ask all the non-Jews you know what the point of life is. They'll tell you to make the world a better place. Right on. That's the Jewish answer. The purpose of human beings in the world is to make the world a better place. That's Esau's job. His job is to make the world a beautiful, safe, harmonious, peaceful, glorious place. And Yaakov's job? To connect this world to a higher source. Then they operate as partners, and they both have a reward. Esau is the man of the field. He's out there, perfecting the world, and Yaakov sits in the tent, learning Torah. The two of them should operate as twins in harmony. Esau's job is to build the world. Yaakov's job is to sit in the center, connecting the world to its source. And therefore, when a non-Jew wants to keep Shabbos, meaning he wants to stop building the world, he's given up his reason for being here. When a non-Jew wants to learn Torah, which means take himself out of the world of construction, which takes incidentally more power. Esau was the older brother and the more mighty one. His job is to conquer the world. When he stops conquering the world, he's given up his reason for being here. And there are only two ways you can step out of the world. One is Shabbos and one is Torah. And those are the two things non-Jews should not be doing, because the non-Jewish work is to build the world. I hope this is clear. Let's talk briefly about what is the purpose of a festival. Are we together? Is anyone with me? Are we following along so far? What is the purpose of a festival? Why is the work of a festival joy, not rest? What is the meaning of happiness? Let's spend a moment talking about happiness. Rabbi Hillel, have we talked about this before, what happiness is in this group? No. Let's talk briefly about what happiness is. And then we'll understand why festivals are times of happiness, and then we'll tie together why Shabbos is a time of rest and festivals are a time of happiness. The questions about happiness are, first of all, is it a mitzvah to be happy? Not really. There's an obligation to be happy, but it's not a formal mitzvah, and that needs understanding. Second question is, how do you achieve happiness in a sad world? Need I remind you of the suffering that we experience all around us all the time? We live in a world fraught with danger, tragedy, difficulty, unexpected tragedy. How do you raise children happy in a world of such trauma? Is there one person in this webinar, in this Zoom session, is there one among you who doesn't know somebody personally who's suffering terribly, maritally, medically, financially, psychologically? How many people do you have to know suffering before it affects your ability to be happy? Well, you tell me you'll go out with some friends and have something to eat and drink and forget about all the suffering in the world. How insensitive is that? No. You'll go with some friends and have something to eat and drink while thinking about all the suffering. That's even worse. What is the solution to this question? How do you generate happiness? And it's a Jew's obligation. Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. You have to serve God with joy. That means all the time, not sometimes. How do you serve God with joy always in a world that involves the mitzvah of mourning for somebody who's died? How do you raise children to serve God with joy in a world fraught with tragedy and death, hanging over us all the time? I mean, my friends, I don't mean to depress you, that's not the purpose of this year. But life involves tragedy. What's the non-Jewish solution? Detachment. They drink, or they take drugs, or they go into the world of entertainment where you can relieve yourself of a connection with reality. If they want to have a really good time, they go watch a horror movie. I haven't seen a movie for 40 years, 50 years. I don't know. I haven't been to, but I see them all the time because I travel. And I sit on a plane and there's 15 screens around me. Each one's worse than the next. The people being killed, cities wiped out, planets exploded, civilizations destroyed, and they're sitting there eating their pretzels and having a wonderful time. I mean, I couldn't sleep at night if I saw one of those. I mean, what are they doing? Evidently, the relief of being divested of your reality is worth watching such dystopic things, such dystopian things. But Judaism is a process of superconscious awareness, not a process of detachment. Here's the problem. How do you remain attached to reality with all its tragedy and suffering and pain and still experience joy? And if it's true that it's mitzvah gedoyel aliyas b'simcha tamid, if it's true that it's a mitzvah to be happy always, what do you mean always? What do you mean always? You've forgotten about all that? How does a Jew do that? The great Chazon Ish, the great rabbi of the last generation, died in 1954. In one of his letters, he makes a statement that is beyond human comprehension. Somebody wrote to the rabbi with some personal difficulties, and his answer, he says something that is literally incomprehensible. Listen to his words. Lemishe makir es oira erish al emes. Let's translate those words loosely. For somebody who knows what life's all about, ein etzev ba'olam. There's no sadness in the world. What is the rabbi saying? Our great rabbis are not given to vague emotional exaggerations. What do you mean there's no sadness in the world? The rabbi forgot about the mitzvah of crying for somebody who's died. He forgot about the European tragedy that he lived through himself. He had the weight of Jewish suffering on his shoulders. He and his wife were childless their whole lives. What do you mean there's no sadness in the world? Rabbi, what are you saying? Let me tell you the answer to these questions. Happiness, not detachment. Is detachment good? Yes, sometimes you need to detach and have a good time and a glass of wine. Yes, but that's not happiness. Happiness is the experience of the soul when it's doing what it needs to be doing. Let me say that again. Real simcha is what you experience when you're moving along a correct road to a correct destination, making progress, conquering difficulties, progressing. You will feel joy, real joy. Your face may not reflect it. Your face may show exertion and pain. But if you feel progress, you're building something that needs to be built, as you construct and as you move along that road, you will feel joy. If you ever invested an hour or a week or a month in a professional or an academic project, and you become so addicted to the project and you become so absorbed You forget to eat and sleep. It's delicious. You know what's delicious? The difficulty. As you conquer the challenges, as you move along that road, and you feel progress being made, it's delicious. The onlooker would not know that because all they see is pain. But when you're working hard to build what you want to build, the pain can be so pleasurable, it can be addictive. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're a Martian. Martian, you land on Earth. You want to understand what Earth beings are all about. So you hire an Earth guide to take you around human society. And the first place he takes you is LA Fitness. You know, you put your eye to the keyhole. Inside, you see a young fellow on a machine, stretching springs, picking up weights. He looks terrible. He's pouring with sweat. He's shaking in agony. He's in basically an early kidney failure. You would conclude that there's another Earth being standing there with a submachine gun, forcing him into this torture. But when you enter that establishment, you'll see there's no one forcing him. He's paying for this experience, and he's loving every moment. Now, the question is, isn't that bizarre? Why would a person enjoy hard work like that? And the answer is because you're constructing something you want to construct. When you feel you're going someplace and you're achieving what you want to achieve, the journey is pleasurable. Never mind the destination. The work becomes addictive. Let's analyze this a bit more deeply. If you think about it carefully, you'll realize, my friends, I'm sharing with you a deep insight into the concept of happiness, which is a very difficult subject. And it pays to understand this. This is life-saving to understand. And I'm going to cover the cause of depression here as well, and the cure for depression. If you analyze it carefully, and you find people moving on difficult journeys, and you find the delicious experience, that climbing that mountain with all its risk and danger is addictively delicious. You'll realize that the reason is all because of anticipation of destination. Say that again. The reason people enjoy the journey is because every step brings you closer to the delicious destination that, in fact, this is so true that in life it often pays not to arrive. Often the anticipation is better than getting there. The anticipation is delicious. And that is why you enjoy hard work. You enjoy moving along that road because every step, and it's very easy to prove that this is true. Imagine you're on this journey towards a delicious destination that you're dreaming of. And it's difficult and hot and arduous and torturous and a very hard journey. But it's delicious as every mile brings you closer. And the journey is delicious. The anticipation is heavenly. And you suddenly realize you're on the wrong train. What happens to the pleasure of the journey? Becomes pure pain. The reason you enjoy the climb of the mountain with all its risk and danger is only because every step is bringing you closer to that destination. And here comes something extremely weird. What is the pleasure of reaching the destination? How hard the journey was that brought you there. When you stand on that mountaintop, you know what you're enjoying? It's not the view. If they put you by a helicopter, it would not be the same thing at all. You're enjoying how much of yourself was invested in getting there. When you hold that beautiful object in your hand that you spent an hour or a week or a month making, it's not the aesthetic beauty that you're enjoying, it's how much of yourself is invested here, how much you sacrificed for this, how much of yourself you put into this thing. Which means that we are constructed in a very bizarre way. We're constructed in such a way that when you're moving towards destination, you're anticipating destination, and that's the pleasure. And when you get to destination, the pleasure is how hard the journey was that got you there. Isn't that weird? You know what this means? Everything in our world is taught by Ramchal is a reflection of a higher world. Everything you experience in life is a projection of something higher. When you spend an hour producing something and enjoying it, and then enjoying the reason, the destination, the result, because in proportion to how hard it was, you know what this bizarre cycle is representing in the higher world? Life. What's our purpose? What's our vision of life? What did we say? A journey against resistance, conquering difficulties, overcoming obstacles with delicious anticipation. The joy of life is knowing that it goes someplace. And what's the joy of the next world? What is it? How much work you put in to get there. What is the joy of Shabbos? Eating what you prepared during the week, relishing the rest that comes with self-fulfillment. When you get to the next world, your pleasure is nothing other than your investment of life. And therefore, real joy When you spend an hour achieving something and you're enjoying the project, and finally you're proud of and enjoy how much work you put in, you are feeling a little bit of the pleasure of life itself. Let's talk briefly about depression. What's the cause of depression? Life that's going nowhere. I'm not talking about chemical issues and genetic stuff. And like most men, when they hit 35, they start getting depressed because they're not the world's greatest champion of what they thought they'd be when they were 18. Okay, I'm talking about life depression. Real joy is the response to a life that is moving. If a life is not moving, you will feel the cold hand of death, the opposite. That's why depression is so painful. What's the cure for depression? Get moving. Here's the secret. Cannot be depressed when you're productive. When the rabbi said, Ein etzev bo'elam, he didn't mean there's no sadness in the world. He didn't forget about tragedy and sadness. Etzev, depression, hopeless, black end of the road, no place to go. That's never an option in Judaism. Never. No matter what you're doing in life, if you're doing what you need to be doing, you'll feel the joy. It's a disastrous situation that God put you in. That's his problem. You're doing what you need to be doing. I'm sure Rabbi Hill will allow me, just for a moment, to talk on the higher plane, if I may. If I may. This is not for you and me, but just to understand the depth. Take people of spiritual perfection. For example, a prophet. Do you know that the prophets were always feeling ecstatic joy, even when they were writing tragedy? The Ralbag points out that when Yirmiyah wrote his book of tragedy, Holocaust, torment, let alone the book of Eicha, he was feeling joy. You know how we know that? Because a prophet cannot receive prophecy if he's distressed. Unbelievable. Take Jonah. He's on a ship. There's a storm. They're panicking. They're throwing things overboard. The sailors are absolutely panicking. He's asleep. They wake him up. Aren't you afraid of? No, I'm a Jew. We crossed the ocean before. No problem. Goes back to sleep. Next time you're 30,000 feet above the Atlantic and the wings start flapping badly, try take a little nap. You don't take a nap. You do tshuva. You say Shema. But a prophet is a baby in his mother's arms. She can be walking into a gas chamber. It makes no difference to him. The Ralbag says, listen to this. When Abraham was about to kill Isaac, as Avram was about to shech Yitzchak, he was feeling simcha shel mitzvah, the joy of a mitzvah, as well as the sadness of the death of his child, at the same time. How do we know he was feeling the joy of the mitzvah? Because as he's about to cut his son's throat, he heard a voice calling out to him from the higher world to stop. And Novi cannot hear that voice if he's distressed. He can only receive that higher message if he's feeling joy. Any Sfardim in our group? Raise your hand. You should be proud of it. Any Sfardim? Look in the Sfardim Machzor for Yom Kippur. There's the most beautiful piyut that we Ashkenazim don't have, describing the Ekeda of Avram about to kill Yitzchak. And there's one line there which takes your breath away. As he's about to kill his son, it says, Ayin b'mar bocha, his eye crying bitter tears, v'leiv sameach, and a heart full of joy at the opportunity to fulfill a mitzvah. Yes, you need to be a prophet for that. But people of greatness, Rabbi Hill, did you ever know Rav Simcha Wasserman? One of my great teachers, Rav Simcha Wasserman, one of the great sages of the last generation, was a man who lived a life of unmitigated tragedy. The Russians tried to kill him in 1915 during the First World War, and in the Second World War, they wiped out his wife's family. They shot his father, who was the great rabbi of the age. He and his wife were childless. He lived through a life of unedited tragedy, and he sparkled with joy. So one day, my brother-in-law, who was his doctor, decided to gather the courage to ask him a personal question. They were very close, and he was very approachable, very kindly. He said to him, how does the Rav manage such joy always? Let's face it, you've lived a life of such tragedy. How do you manage such joy? Rav Simcha looked at him with those amazing blue eyes. And he said, every situation in life that I find myself in, I ask what can be done. Whatever can be done, I do. Whatever cannot be done, I don't worry about. You know what we do? We don't do what should be done, and we worry. But a person of spiritual greatness asks what can be done. If you do what can be done, you will feel joy. The situation around you is crashing in disaster. That's God's problem. He knows what he's doing. I'm not employed to solve his problems. I'm employed to do my job. You cannot be depressed when you're productive. You can be walking through the valley of the shadow of death. But if you're doing what you need to be doing, you feel joy. You feel the pain. You feel the pain of what's going on around you, but it's not your problem. Again, I'm sure Rabbi Hill will allow me to speak personally, and I'm speaking for him as well, I'm sure. We've chosen a profession which is a losing game. A losing game. I know all Rabbi Hill's students become religious overnight. Yes, I know that, but he's unusual. They see the light. But to be honest, for every person that we interest in Judaism, 10 are lost. In the last 50 years, they think about 50,000 Americans have been brought in by Jewish outreach efforts, but more than 1 million have been lost. We're on a battlefield being shot to pieces, usually by our own people. Speaking personally, I would have liked to be in a profession that's a winning game. I started my life in another profession. And although it may be hard to believe, I had academic promise. I probably could have achieved something in that world. And I gave it up. And I moved into Jewish education and outreach, and it's a disaster. What's the solution? What's my job? If I'm a medic on the battlefield, and my work is taking one more wounded soldier and stopping his bleeding, that's my job. There's a war going on around me. That's his problem. I'm not employed to win the war. I'm employed to do the best I can. Of course I feel the pain. Of course I feel it intensely, but it's not my job. I hope this is clear. No matter what situation God puts you in, if you're dealing with what he's given you, doing the best you can be doing in the circumstances, you feel tremendous thrill of accepting the challenge of what you're being given and doing it well. Doing it well can mean one more smile when you're dying. It doesn't matter what it is. You'll feel the joy. There's only one escape from a life that's going nowhere besides depression. And it's even worse than depression. You know what that is? It's spending a life engaged in the thrill of building something frenetically and frantically that's meaningless. That's a Jew or a person who spends his life building money or political power or muscle or a beer can collection. Because those things, once you're driven to achieve and conquer difficulties and move ahead, will keep you thrilled. But unfortunately, the result is zero. And by the way, when Jews do this, they do it seriously. When a Jewish boy builds a beer can collection, he takes it seriously because Jews knows that life is serious. When a Jewish boy builds a beer can collection, he has to have every last one. And he starts a fan club and a website and a who knows what. And that is worse than depression because that'll keep you happy the rest of your life, but you'll have nothing to show for it. Okay, let's come back to our point of origin and wrap it up. Joy is feeling the journey progressing. You know what a festival is? You know why Samachta b'chagecha? Because festivals are steps on the journey. A festival is called a moed, a moving towards destination. You know what the Jewish name is for the festivals? Regel, walking. That's what a festival is called. What do you think is the meaning of a pilgrim festival? You're going someplace. As the year moves on its cycle, every festival is another way station on the journey. You stop off temporarily to rejoice and revel in what it means to be a Jewish people. A few weeks later, you get off the train at a station and revel for a day in what it means to receive Torah. What a joy as that stage of the journey is achieved. And a few weeks, as we move through the cycle of life, every step, here's the secret. Shabbat is a destination. Chag is a station. Every festival is a station on the journey. The happiness, the joy, samachta b'chagecha, is because every step of the journey, you're relishing the achievement of adding this component to what it means to be a Jew. You know what it means to be part of this people that are trudging through history, marching through the deserts of history, with fending off genocidal attacks, carrying that precious Sefer Torah to its cosmic destination. What a privilege. It should make you dance in the street with ecstasy that you've been given that role. Every step of that journey, every festival is a celebrating of another step in that journey. And that's the ecstasy of a festival. Shabbat has nothing to do with that. Shabbat is where the journey's going. Shabbat is the endpoint where you finally put down the burden and you sit down and you relish the components of the journey that have come together. Anyway, this is an introduction to the subject. There's much more to say, obviously. There's also the question of a messianic era, which is not this world or the next world. Where does that fit? For this, you'll have to buy my book. And of course, as I always say, if you buy 2 copies, then you'll really get it. But be that as it may, the point is, this introduction to the subject. Shabbat is rest. Festivals are joy. Joy is an experience of the journey progressing. And as the journey moves and progresses, and you've exhilarating experience of another mile and another milestone and another station where you absorb the message of what it means to build this into your character, is an ecstasy as you move. Shabbat is where you're longing to end up, where you'll finally sit down and unburden yourself and simply enjoy the result of the journey, where every element of the journey has constructed the reality that we experience on Shabbat. Anyway, this is an introduction to the subject. I hope you enjoy this and find it meaningful. This is a key to understanding the cycle of life from a Jewish point of view. It's a key to understanding Shabbos. Shabbos is not a weekend. It's a premonition of who you are. Shabbos is a deep meditation of what it will feel like to leave this world. Who are you? What have you constructed? That's not the work of a festival. The work of a festival is to relish what it means to be a Jew, what it means to receive Torah, what it means to reform the personality in tshuva, and whatever it is. That's the work of a festival. But Shabbos is simply the deepest communion, the deepest meditation in what I am and what I've become. And then to exit Shabbos refreshed, taking a step down to move next week to another step in the spiral, when you will experience the same thing again on a higher plane. Rabbi Hill, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Rabbi Tatz. Quick question. So why is Yom Kippur called Shabbat Shabbaton, the ultimate Shabbos? What's the understanding?
Yom Kippur is a confluence of both the joy of a festival and the endpoint of Shabbos, where the two come together. Yom Kippur is a final destination in tshuva, where you've done the work of 10 days of cleansing and perfecting, and you reach a pinnacle of what it is to be deeply understand what I am. And therefore Shabbos, Yom Kippur is an ultimate Shabbos, right? Again, it's a festival. You feel the joy of the step of the work that is represented by tshuva. But what is tshuva? A return to the original self. Sof ma'aseh b'machshava tchila, which is a Shabbos idea. And therefore Yom Kippur is a total transcendence. And that's why Yom Kippur, unlike the other festivals, has the law of Shabbat. No construction allowed. Okay, no building at all. So that's a confluence of where the elements of the journey meet destination in the cycle of the year.
Thank you. Do you have a minute for a question? Should we ask if anyone's got a question? Do you have to go?
No, it's okay.
Anybody have a question? Put your hands up and we'll try and unmute you, Sasha. Sasha, you've waited, so go for it.
Thank you so much. That was really, really interesting. I just wanted to ask, in terms of, you mentioned that a non-Jew and a Jew has like a different purpose, but it kind of sounds as if we're depriving a non-Jew of these tools to connect to something more meaningful, and we're confining them to a world of detachment by like not allowing them to even engage in these concepts. So how would a non-Jew even connect to the more meaningful if they don't have Shabbat, and if they don't have Torah and these things which you say are so essential for like a meaningful life?
Sasha, I hope you will enjoy the answer, so listen carefully. The way a non-Jew gets to the ultimate ecstatic existence in the world to come is by building this world. That's their role, that's their connection. They're not doing it for no reason. Again, listen well. We're not saying that a non-Jew's work is to build the world and then disappear. He's thrilled. The concept of a non-Jew is to build the world because he's a partner in building another world. Sasha, do you know anything about football?
A bit.
Okay. So when one player in the football team, not an English player, unfortunately, but you know, okay, when that player moves up the field with the ball and makes it possible for the person he passes to score a goal, whose goal is it?
The person who passed to.
That's both of theirs.
Yeah.
When a woman gives birth to a baby, who's the parent of that child?
Both.
You better believe it. And therefore, the work of preparation and the work of bringing to completion are a harmony. Yaakov and Esav were twins. Esav's pleasure in the next world is the fact that he built this world, and Yaakov connected it. Each needs the other.
But they themselves can't engage in like that meditation that's so essential. Or
Sasha, your question is like, a man cannot engage in giving birth. Isn't that sad and tragic? No, his role is beginning the pregnancy and his wife's role is ending it, and they're shared equally. When a non-Jew builds this world and makes it perfect so that his teammate, Yaakov, can take his work and connect it, they both share equally. Now, the point is that neither of us are doing our job the way we should be at the moment. That's a different problem. But that's the notion of a harmony. Okay, the mature understanding of a partnership is that both share the credit equally. I hope you understand this is very important. And that's why the Rambam writes that any non-Jew who does his work in the world correctly has a share in the world to come. How does he have a share in the world to come? By doing what he needs to be doing. Okay, Rabbi Hill, I hope this is clear. Let me thank you for this opportunity. I look forward to next time we meet.
For sure. Please God next month. Thank you, Rabbi Tatz. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And if you're in Israel, actually even on Facebook, on Wednesday night, I'm doing a class about how to see miracles in your life, connecting to the miracles of Hanukkah, which is coming up soon. This Shabbos, totally Sasha and Sophie are going to be coming to Tzfas along with lots of people. So please come and join us. And who was it also? Who's in Yerushalayim? Rabbi Tatz's friend from Yerushalayim who went to South Africa. You better join us as well in Tzfas. There's space for you as well. So please be in touch with me if you want to come. Even if you're living in London or America, come and get on a plane. You've got 3 days. Any bit of snow. Don't be worried about a bit of snow. You know, Hashem will definitely get you to Tzfas in time, no doubt. And next week on Tuesday night, we've got the great Rabbi Laser Brody, who translated the book Garden of Emunah, coming to Tel Aviv. And on Wednesday night, I'll be in Yerushalayim giving a talk with Yosef Cardona, celebrating Hanukkah with us, the one who sang Shir Lama'ando. So anyway, take care. Thank you so much, Rabbi Tatz. Hopefully we'll see you very soon. And Rabbi Tatz, even during your talk, I put your shidduch in flow. The shidduch has been suggested. So I like to if not now, when? So Rabbi Tatz just suggested a shidduch, and the shidduch has been now set forward. So now we have to trust Hashem. All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much. All the best. Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Yeah, come to Tzfas. Come to Tzfas. Bye.